So last block, Joe talked about the emails Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, sent to lawyer John Eastman. Well, the New York Times is reporting on another email exchange, this one from Eastman to another pro-Trump lawyer, while discussing efforts to get the Supreme Court to hear an election case from Wisconsin. Eastman reportedly wrote to another pro-Trump lawyer, quote, "So the odds are not based on the legal merits, but an assessment of the justices' spines. And I understand there is a heated fight underway." The pro-Trump attorney, Kenneth Chesborough, replied, "Odds of action before January 6th will become more favorable if the justices start to fear that there will be wild chaos on January 6th, unless they rule by then. Either way." That exchange took place on December 24th, 5 days after Trump tweeted for his followers to come to the Capitol on January 6th, posting, quote, "Will be wild." I mean, Joe, it's just, it's really what they're putting together, by the way, is fascinating. But this Ginny Thomas angle is so troubling to me. And I know that, you know, a wife and a husband can have two separate careers and lives, but she's married to a Supreme Court justice. Well, and the types of emails and texts that she's sending out are extremely disturbing.
Well, not only that, she is trying actively to undermine the Constitution of the United States. She's trying actively to undermine the rule of law. She's trying actively to undermine a peaceful transition from one presidency to the next. She's trying to throw out the votes of 80 million Americans to negate them. And George Conway, you look at what Donald Trump's lawyer, who she's texting with, what he and his cohort are talking about. There's a tidy little definition for it. It's called fascism. I mean, you could call it mob rule, but this is just pure 100% proof fascism, where you have Trump's lawyer going, you know, we may not win on the merits. Another guy going, yeah, but with the mob rule, if there's enough chaos, if the justices are intimidated, even though we don't have the law on our side, maybe we can intimidate them through force and violence to rule our way. Fascism, isn't it, George?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a completely lawless view of the world. And thankfully, the Supreme Court did not give any of those lawsuits the time of day. I hope to heaven's sake that all of this was just John Eastman blowing smoke, and that he wasn't really commenting on actual deliberations before the court, because it didn't seem, there wasn't really any evidence presented in anything that the court decided that there was any serious controversy at the court about the meritlessness of the various cases that Trump lost up there.
So, Jackie, is the committee looking closer now because of all this reporting at Ginny Thomas about calling her in front of them as a witness? I mean, you put this together, these emails to Eastman and the pro-Trump attorney, and you look at the text to Mark Meadows where she is harassing him effectively into doing something about overturning the election. That's the infamous text where Mark Meadows replied and says the King of Kings will triumph, comparing Donald Trump to Jesus in that exchange. So she is a central figure in all this. Her husband is a Supreme Court justice who, as Joe pointed out earlier, was the lone dissenting vote in the Supreme Court on an issue around January 6th, trying to protect Donald Trump. Is she a central figure in the eyes of this committee?
I think that the committee is getting there with her. As more and more information comes in, we have to remember this is a live, ongoing investigation at the moment. Our reporting does not show that the committee is considering necessarily calling her in as a witness, but that because of these emails that have recently been delivered to the committee by John Eastman because of a ruling by a federal court judge, David Carter, that happened just last week, that the scope of her involvement in these efforts to overturn the results of the election is now wider than previously known. And what's under discussion is at least using a part of a hearing to focus on her involvement. I have to give credit to my colleague colleague, Emma Brown, who has been all over this story for months now. She is the person at the Washington Post who initially broke the stories of the emails Ginny Thomas was sending to state legislatures that were essentially advocating for the legal theory that John Eastman was putting forth. Obviously, it's fairly troubling. I think, George, I'm sorry to say, I think you're giving John Eastman way too much of the benefit of the doubt. This guy was a prolific emailer. He knew exactly what he was doing when he was arguing that that they might be more effective in terms of stirring up chaos in order to pressure the judges and influence the debate in that way. I think we're going to find out much more. But on the other side of this, I think what we're going to hear from Judge Ludig today about John Eastman that is as equally problematic is this idea that the election nullification theory, the theory that John Eastman was propagating, that state legislatures could essentially pick an alternative slate of electors and choose who won the election, send that to Congress. That is actually picking up steam in conservative circles. And I think Ludig is going to do a job of basically methodically, systemically cutting through that and saying why it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, George, I just want to follow up on the last question I asked about Ginny Thomas. I mean, and all these people, like John Eastman. You knew John Eastman, right? Conservative.
I met him maybe once.
Yeah, well, but you knew of him. I mean, you knew.
Yeah,
of
I knew
him.
of him, absolutely.
People in conservative circles knew of him, and it's the question I have about him is the question I have about Ginny Thomas. I mean, did people see this coming? Because I mean, I knew Ginny Thomas when I was in Congress, but. My problem with Ginny Thomas then was she was the establishment. All she was doing was defending the Republican establishment. She was like, we were sort of the rebels trying to balance the budget more quickly, trying to push, but she was always doing the establishment's bidding. And now she's like doing QAnon theories, talking about cracking. Like, what happened? When did this transformation to full-blown QAnon conspiracy theorist and insurrectionist, when did that take place?
I can't pinpoint it. I think she's been out there for years, and I think, behind the scenes, I think she's made a lot of people uncomfortable. But I don't know when this whole when these people kind of went into orbit, and particularly, Eastman. Eastman was always a little bit out there, and there was, there was a spectrum of attitudes about all sorts of things on the conservative side. It's not monolithic, but in the last few years, some people have just gone off into hyperspace and out of reality, and that's what we see with Eastman and Ginny Thomas.
Yeah.
George Conway and the Washington Post, Jackie Alemany, thank you both very much. I am sure we'll be hearing back from both of you soon as we walk through these hearings. Coming up.